guys, welcome back to another episode, and we're about to take a 3-hour journey up to Oviedo, Florida. And what we're doing today, as you can see for the title and thumbnail, we're going to be talking about my suspension, right? And I really believe this is one of the best suspension setups for the G80 and for any platform, because the guys over at AST Moton, they have some special sauces that are coming out in the near future, and we're going to be talking about that. Because once that gets revealed or put out there, I'm telling you guys, this is going to be the all-in-one inclusive suspension setup for this platform. As you can see, the car has gone through some changes, but after we come back from Orlando, I'm probably going to throw on the LMRs just to switch it up again. But yeah, I'm excited to go up there, and we're going to be filming a whole bunch of other different videos. I'm going to try to meet up with Ben and Towson, but it just depends on what time I get done. But also we're going to be filming a F80 video that you'll see in a future video. But stay tuned, there's going to be so much more content, and I appreciate you guys for the amount of support that you guys have been showing me. Alright, so we finally made it over to PSI. The car is up on the lift, and in a little bit we're gonna have Adam install the sway bar end links. These are from AST Moton, but what I do want to mention is that this suspension absolutely has been the best suspension I felt. Alright, so one thing I definitely want to mention, if you guys haven't thought about getting your oil cooler guard, definitely check that out. That's something that's going to save your oil cooler. You can definitely see over here there's been some scrapes already, right? And that saved my oil cooler from any catastrophic failure. And we're also going to be checking the alignment just to verify and making sure that this is good to go when I head back down south. But one thing I wanted to mention, if you guys are looking into the suspension, there's multiple different avenues you need to look at, right? If you're keeping this car for a year, then I probably wouldn't suggest spending all that money on a set of coilovers. I think installing a set of springs would be very sufficient enough. But if you guys are looking into going a little further and keeping the car a little bit long term, when I mean long term, I'm talking about like 2.5 years plus, maybe 3-4 years, then you would want to maybe look into a coilover, right? There's many different companies out there, right? You have KW, Olin's, AST Moton, which is I have on the car. You got to look at what fits your budget, number one, and also what you intend on doing for it. But in a little bit, we're gonna have Sean chime in, because Sean actually does a lot of the development for some of the new cars that AST and Moton kind of push out there for the products. But what I had a teaser about, they are innovating the coilovers, right, with a whole bunch of things that you're going to be wanting to change your suspension, like you heard earlier. But I will say though, AST Moton Coilovers has far exceeded my expectations. I know when I first heard about them and knowing how much history they have in racing, I was like, is this suspension going to be too aggressive for me? Is it going to be too aggressive for daily driving? This has not been aggressive at all. This has been so poised, like you guys heard, or you're going to hear in a little bit. I'm going to kick you guys back into a segment in a little bit where I was talking about it in the car driving up here and how it feels, how it rides. So let's head over to that segment now. All right, thank you, Ken, for kicking it over to me. So the reason why I wanted to give you guys a good review about it is that sitting in the car now, the stability, the way this car feels with the suspension, how poised, like the word poised is definitely a good description of this suspension. The way it handles any bumps on the highway, the rebound is not too aggressive, and it all depends on how you set it up. But for a daily driver and something that you would want to take on the track, maybe autocross for a little bit, it is a great feeling ride. I've had my wife in the car, I've had my son in the car passed out, and even hitting these really aggressive bumps on the highway or even on the roadway didn't wake him up. But I've known in the past, I've had other suspensions on my F80 and stuff, and that alone, like comparing what I had on there to here, this is very compliant. There's times where I've gone, to Mexico and gone a little bit fast, and it feels very stable, and I gotta say, when you modify a car and you put the right type of parts or modifications, it just makes the car so much more enjoyable to drive. Not only does this look good for stance wise, if you guys are into stance, I know some other people are just into functionality of it, which is totally understandable. But when you get an opportunity to ride in a really good feeling suspension, like there's a lot of feedback you could get. It feels tight when you want to pivot into some of these turns or going off the on ramp or even off ramp of the highway. It feels really nice. So as I'm driving right now to the shop, that you're going to see this clip obviously before what you saw before, I just wanted to chime in and give you guys an idea of what it feels like. Other than that, let's kick it back into the shop and continue with the rest of the video. So the last time we saw Adam was about a year ago, but I was just actually talking to him earlier, and I think since the last time, you've done probably 4 to 5 installs of this whole setup?
Yeah. So obviously Ken's was the first, and it's either 4 or 5. Did one actually like 2 weeks ago.
I think the main thing too is people realize that there is a lot of functionality between this, right? Sure, you could go with the bag setup, and it depends if you want to go full air ride. There's definitely advantages and also disadvantages with that. And one of the biggest disadvantages, if one of your fuses don't function or you blow a fuse, you don't have a spare fuse, then you're pretty much stuck, unless you go to a local hardware store and pick up a fuse, or you could have bag failure. With this setup, you don't have that problem, because basically you're on a static stance. But Adam, anything else to chime in with? I know you've had quite a little bit, experience with this whole setup. It's definitely not an easy setup to install by yourself, right?
No, it's not an easy setup, but in the end, it pays off. It's one of those, I guess, for lack of better words, of do you plan on owning the car long term or not? The installs that I've had done on these cars are 2020, 2021, like first production cars, early cars. I just did one on a 25 M4 that the guy, he's like, I'm just gonna keep the car. So making that decision up front of, am I gonna keep the car, am I just gonna lease it, or keep it for 2-3 years and then get rid of it. It's a long-term investment.
Definitely agree. Definitely a long-term investment too, and you really have to ask yourself, because this is not a cheap setup. This is a setup that if you're looking to, go long-term, like I said earlier, 2+ years, 2.5+ years, it could be worth it. But then once you go into the 3 to 4 year mark, in my personal opinion, I definitely think it's worth it, because overall, after a while, your stock struts, they could get blown out from the lowering springs, because essentially your stock struts are not made to be that low, and over time, depending on where you live, especially up north where the bumps are horrible, yeah, you're gonna make that shit loosey goosey.
Yeah. It's a, I know I keep saying long-term investment, but it's a mod that, like, you can advance with, I guess, for lack of better words. You can do multiple things with it. The nice thing is, if you say, hey, in a few years you want to get rid of the stance cups and upgrade the kit to a 2-way or a 3-way or a 4-way, you can do that. Me and Kim were just talking about serviceability. It's something that you can keep long term. Whereas, you know, stock struts and everything, you're not. You know, the performance aspect of it and performance, you know, value of the stock struts with a set of lowering springs or anything is going to degrade, and it's going to degrade faster with a lowering spring on it because they're not made for it. Whereas, you know, with the Moton one-ways, they're developed and made to perform through a wide range for a long period of time.
Absolutely. So in a little bit, we'll have Sean here at PSI. You guys seen him before in the past. We'll have him chime in. There's actually some real developing news with the suspension, because they have a whole bunch of new things that are coming. And I like to call it the secret sauce, because once that comes out, it is a game changer. I'm telling you, you're gonna make a lot of people want to switch from whatever suspension you have right now, switch on to full Moton suspension. And you know, it's something that I've seen at SEMA, and I can't wait to tell you guys about it in a little bit. Everybody talks about having the best suspension, and I've had this for about almost a year now, and we talked about this briefly at SEMA. You guys have a lot of things going on with AST Moton, and also too, like, I'm telling you guys, this is the best because there's so much adjustability. You can build it up, you can build it down, right? But the functionality between the air cups, the ride quality, and we were just talking about that. You were talking about back in the day, the G80 M world, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Ken had asked me, you know, why the stance cup, why the air cup, like how did you come up with that? Well, it was something that we developed on some of the G80M cars that have crazier body kits. As you guys know, some of the FRS guys, some of the super guys are running crazy bumpers that stick out, you know, 6-8 inches in the front. And the cars are literally undrivable unless you have an air cup system like this. So we actually had developed it back in the day for a couple special SEMA cars that were super low that the guys were using. And then it kind of came to mind once people were running lips like Ken's and kind of doing a lot of aggressive aerodynamics for the G80s, that it would be something that we could offer. And because Stanceparts is actually based in Holland or the Netherlands, like Moton AST, it's a real easy collaboration of the two companies where Stanceparts can send the actual cups to Moton to develop the mount, because there's a special mount that goes under the cup that Moton developed. So it's just easy. We can order it together, then it ships to us with everything assembled, ready to go and ready to install. So that's a really neat fact.
And also too, I think with the demand from the United States, I'm sure other countries too, about having that functionality, we saw at SEMA, Moton AST, they're actually developing their own entire system, right?
Yeah, correct. I mean, because Moton AST is a machine factory and they're able to make, you know, all of the parts that we make for some of the custom stuff that's done, they make it in-house. So the cup is actually something that can easily be machined with the technology that they have. So they've been developing a cup that's Moton branded, that is actually sealed, and it's actually a smaller profile. So the diameter is actually smaller, which actually doesn't really come into play on the G80s because of the way the suspension is designed. But some of the other cars that we've been doing the cups on, it needs to be a smaller diameter and a smaller package, which will also benefit G80 guys and other guys that want to do some other special stuff with the cups.
And then I was just talking earlier, right? One of the biggest issues that people have is, man, I don't want to get rid of my EDC. My EDC is very important to me, whether they think it is. To be honest, like even with this car, even when I had it on springs or, you know, my stock suspension, I rarely touch the EDC, but I can see where people would want to still utilize it because it comes in factory. You don't want to lose it.
Of course.
But Moton has something really cooking, right? Something's cooking there.
Yeah, and I mean, it's something that Moton hasn't really done because they weren't really happy with the setup that a lot of other manufacturers were offering. It's actually what's called an electronic valve. And normally when you adjust the rebound on these one-ways, you turn the knob. It's a mechanical knob, which changes the valves inside of the damper. Well, now there's an electronic damper that will actually connect with the EDC and ESC cars to be able to control the Sport and everything and go ahead and tighten up the suspension when you put it on Sport and Sport Plus with these cars. You know, which is something that really has been in development for a while, because not only do we have to develop, does Moton AST have to develop the communication system that communicates the car to the damper, but they also have to have a valve inside of the shock that has the performance and the speed in order to have what the engineers for Moton AST want to have. They want that quick change performance just as if you're changing the knob. So that's been in development for a while. They finally have a valve that has the speed and the connectivity that they wanted. Now they're working on the communication between the car and the damper in order to offer that. So, you know, next year, middle of the year, towards later in the year, there's going to be electronic dampers which can be retrofitted into a setup like you already have. And the goal would be for Ken to be able to run that setup so he can change it on the fly with a button, you know, the rebound and the stiffness based on changing roads, just as you would do with an OEM, you know, setup.
And, you know, for cars that don't have like EDC with the car, I know it's a standalone system, right? Because it's all from Moton. So can you grab like E92 M3 that didn't have, you know, EDC? Can you actually put that whole system and have EDC now?
Yes, I mean, it'll be a standalone knob, which will show, we have some B-roll which we'll send from SEMA. It's actually a touchscreen knob that allows you to dial in the rebound and the compression and have saved settings. So you could save like a race, you could save a sport. It's a really intuitive setup, but yes, you'll be able to add it to any car that doesn't even have electronic suspension, like E46 M3, E30 M3, all of those cars. But really it's a twofold approach. It's a twofold product, because you have the ability to add electronics to something that didn't have it before, but you also have the integrated connection. And for me and for a lot of customers that get these electronic suspensions like the G99 M5 and the G90 M5, my goal is to be able to offer a Moton setup for the new M5 that is strictly plug and play. You literally plug it into the OEM sensors, you can adjust the shocks and everything just like OEM, but you get the advantage of having a full coilover setup for better performance, better ride, and better quality you know, than you would get from OEM.
Yeah, because most people now, right now, if you change it to coilovers, you're going to have the chassis stabilization error code, right? And then you have to delete it.
Yeah. Which can be coded out, you know, which you can also run, you know, there's some defeats on the market you can buy, you know, which work, and that's what we do now. But this will give us that extra, you know, sort of plug and play ability. And it just keeps some of the value when you buy a new car and some of the technology. It keeps the value that you have and doesn't compromise. I mean, modifications are compromises. Ken and I talk about this a lot on my channel. I know he does too. And there's always something to compromise, whether it's being able to have people in the car, whether it's being able to load the car with a bunch of stuff, you know, getting into driveways. There's always something. So when we work towards being able to do these really cool mods that have no compromise, where you can run low when you want, raise the car when you want to go in an entrance, or have the button adjustability just like the factory car, you know, it's a goal to work towards. It'll never be fully there, but we can always work to do that.
And also too, like Adam and I were talking about this. Is this setup for everybody? It's not a cheap setup, and I won't say it's a setup where if you're leasing a car for a year or you're only planning on keeping the car for a year, it may be very difficult to swallow that pill unless you have an unlimited bank account.
Sure.
But if you're the type of person that's going to keep the car for long term and you see the ability to, you know, take it to the track or whatever, this might be the best setup, because you could take it to the track, you could take it to a show, ride low, and not have to worry about driveways, because there are obstacles out there on the highway that you can't avoid. But when it comes to speed bumps or even like these horrible driveways, a push of a button and you're good to go.
Yeah, and I think also that, you know, This is for someone that's really taking the G80 to a next level, you know, the M2, M3, M4. It's guys that are doing femto unlocks. It's guys that are running crazy wheels and really nice aero and stuff. So it's not for everyone, but you know, for those guys that don't want to do something as substantial as this and don't want to spend that money, we do the AST ALS kit all day, which is the adjustable spring kit, which actually keeps your factory dampers and keeps your EDC in place. It just allows us to lower the car and get rid of that terrible wheel gap that, you know,
everybody
hates
hates
so much.
Yeah. I know you guys have a lot of things cooking, right? And potentially possibly a move, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at, right now I'm designing and building a building right here in Central Florida. We're gonna be moving our facility in 2025. Don't know the exact dates yet, but that's gonna be a big step for us because we're gonna be able to be a little bit more efficient with our space and be able to have a built to spec headquarters for PSI.
So stay tuned. I know as soon as that's ready and good to go, we'll definitely be, you know, at the shop checking it out and, you know, throwing a event there. So it'll be a good opportunity for you guys to meet the team here,
Yeah.
pick their brains about the products. And if you guys need any work in the Central Florida area or even like anywhere in the United States, because they work on really cool builds. One of the builds that kind of brings to my mind is the E91 wagon that actually just got raffled off, right?
It did.
Somebody just wanted it at SEMA.
Yeah, it's actually out in LA. I'm actually going to call the guy today that has the car. He wanted to talk to me about some things on the car and where to take it for service and do all that stuff. But we do a lot of cars from all over the country. I have cars here coming in from Georgia, coming in from South Florida, cars from Connecticut. We do a lot of that. We do a lot of transport stuff. But any questions you guys have about modifications you see here on Ken's channel or my channel, just give me a call. I'm here at the shop every day. You can literally ask for me, ask for Sean, and I'll give you the answers just like we're here talking in person.
Yeah, this guy works too much. But again, Sean has been a great partner with Beamer Invasion and, you know, making this happen because I had a vision. This was a vision that we talked about. And I know it took some time to develop.
Yeah.
But I am very extremely happy. I've gone through many other different suspensions with my previous F80, but by far this feels so poised on the highway. Even when I drove back with all the suspension parts and everything weighing the car down, it felt solid. I felt like I could take this car to speeds where I could get arrested, and it was to a point where I'm like very shocked of how controlled it felt.
Yeah, I mean, the Moton dampers are a very powerful, you know, high pressure monotube damper. And a lot of the development for this chassis happens on the Nürburgring. We have a really huge partner, 24/7 Performance, who just builds race cars for the Nürburgring. That's the only thing they do at their shop. And they exclusively run Moton dampers on all the G, F, and E cars that they build. And they've been a real big help in developing it for the Nürburgring, which is not a representation of everyday road, but it is the most extreme environment for the pieces and for all of the technology. So that's a good aspect, and we've really poured that into all of the setups from Moton for the G8X.
Yeah, so Sean, anything else to tell people?
I don't think so. Just thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking out all this nerd stuff that we're doing on Ken's side and my side. And we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, definitely check out their channel. They have a lot more in-depth videos about, you know, various BMW products, even models coming out with their cars. And I always see your channel. You always have an opportunity to see the newest BMWs, which I'm kind of jealous about. But definitely check their channel out because you guys actually saw the M5 wagon that's going to be coming out very soon, or actually is out.
Yeah, it was at the launch at Pebble Beach. They launched the car last car week, which was last August. So I got to see the car. I spent a lot of time with the car. Didn't get to drive it, but I spent a lot of time with it. And it basically made my decision to get the M5 Touring, which is going to be our next project vehicle for PSI, which we're going to get first quarter next year. So that's exciting.
So definitely stay tuned to their channel because they're going to be building that to an epic build. And I already seen it with the previous, you know, builds they've had. So other than that, I want to thank Sean and the team here for, you know, doing what they do, right? Car enthusiasts that really put work into making sure that when you're leaving here, you're expecting the work you paid for.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks, Ken.
No problem.